How's it going, y'all? My name is Jesse Lynch, and welcome to Brutal Advice to Myself, fundamentally. And just working through stuff. This is a bit of a meditation in how I intend to work through. Really, today is going to be a bit of a business plan, an avatar worksheet, and trying to start this new branch of a team. And I've talked about this a little bit before on the previous episode, but I'm trying to create either a new channel, and some of what I work on today will help me decide if it should be a new channel or if it should coincide with our main channel, and where I think maybe there's a better opportunity and where I don't poison the well, and there's all those things that I'm trying to think about. But I'm going to work through that stuff today. And like always, I do not care what brokerage you're at, what brokerage you decide to join. If you're a new agent, I have a lot of stuff on this channel about Real Broker. That is where I'm at. I'm not really making that content anymore, not because I don't believe in Real Broker, but just because I don't find that to be the most helpful information at this time. And so I also really want to be clear that there's other content where I talk about people joining my team. At this point, I almost certainly do not want you to be on my team. It's an interesting place to be, but I've sort of worked through what I want my life to look like, and it isn't necessarily a big team. It's a small team full of killers, and that is what I'm working on designing right now. And today in particular, I want to be able to focus entirely on content creation and marketing and bringing clients in, and allowing the team to grow into a small but mighty team of killers by way of just focusing on that stuff, right? The more clients I can bring in, the more killers I can have. Again, I don't want, the goal is not to have many agents, because I don't think that is the best use of my time, to be completely honest. I think a video like this, if somebody is willing to put in the hour or so that it will take for me to work through something like this, I think this is more helpful to new agents or agents who are trying to work through some marketing things. I think that the videos that I make on this channel and have made on this channel are more helpful to a wider variety of agents than I could be in a one-on-one session with a brand new agent. And even though at the moment there is no financial gain from doing this for me, and that's really not the focus at all. The main goal for me is to help more agents, right? And to help more people in general. On the real estate side, how do I help as many people accomplish what they're looking for in real estate? And I think I figured out really good ways of doing that. That's always the North Star, helping more people. And on a channel like this, that is also the main goal, the North Star. And I truly believe that this, just peel behind the curtain, is the kind of thing that I wish I could have watched other people do, especially really early on. And don't get me wrong, there are people who taught me this stuff on the internet almost entirely on YouTube. There are people teaching this kind of thing, but you have to dig for it. And it took me a long time to find certain people who kind of spoke my language and helped me understand how to work through some of these things. Like, how do I create a brand that feels well-rounded? Luckily, I've always liked that stuff, but I was watching that kind of thing several years before I ever got into real estate, because I was thinking about my band as a brand, and my real estate company as a brand. And my photography company as a brand. Obviously, real estate, I think that is the case too. So I don't care what brokerage you're at, and I almost certainly don't want you on my team. Okay, but I still hope that I can be helpful, and I hope that just complete, I know there's nothing in it for me statistically, but it's just out of the interest of trying to be helpful, and also simultaneously giving myself an hour to work through some of these things that I might not otherwise give myself time to work through. So I believe that brand fundamentally, either it arrives accidentally and you don't know that you're doing it, you're just being like, well, this is stuff that I like. That's great. Honestly, stuff that you like, I believe, is a brand. But I think there needs to be some intention to it as well, because there may be things where the things you like are just too disconnected from what the brand is. And I think almost everybody has things that they like, things that they're interested in, that also just like don't really align, or well, certainly that. And by the way, this is not necessarily like a political idea, but I hope that you have ideas that in your mind that do not line up perfectly with some more basic avatar or archetype, right? I really hope that you have nuances in you that are, whether it's thoughts or activities or things that you find joy in, that just kind of like don't totally make sense, right? Being purely an archetype, I think, doesn't necessarily make a person that interesting, my opinion. If you're just a super basic archetype, you feel somewhat shallow. But it's the interesting things about you, and also your weaknesses, I believe, are things that make you more compelling to other people. So I am going to work through, Oscar's here, by the way. He's been such a good boy, just absolutely chilling. And so far, this has been a nice way to do these Sunday mornings. We drive here, take the Grenadier, usually drive to the shop. Nobody else is ever here on Sunday mornings, and just sit down, press record. Oskar chills in the room, knock on wood, hopefully continues to. And and then we work through some stuff. Cool. So I'm working on this new brand. I don't expect that you've watched the previous episodes. Honestly, I've had 2 episodes of this thing out, and I know they're not good yet. So I apologize for that, but I also don't, because I want to put my money where my mouth is. I want to show you, if you're watching this as a brand new agent, I want to show that, like, just put it out and move on, because that's what I'm doing with this channel, because I want to shift it slightly, right? I want to shift what I'm doing on this channel. I want to, frankly, dedicate less time to this channel, but try to provide as much or more value by doing something like this. And again, I find so much value in working through something with somebody. I think there's no better bond than to work on something with someone. Obviously, whether that be like at a job and you're getting things done together, I think that's really, really powerful. Some of my best friends are people that I met at work, or they are people who I was in a band with, who we worked on one project for a decade together. And that's just, it's crazy how much of a connection that makes. And so I'm not necessarily trying to form that connection. That's not like the main goal with doing this, but I know that some of my biggest lessons were also working through something with somebody. And I wonder if there's anybody who's truly going to follow along with me as I work through this avatar. I'm very curious if as you're going, either you can work on this avatar as well, and I can put the very basics of this worksheet in the description. We have an actual worksheet that you could find on an older video on this channel, the avatar video. There should be a link to the avatar worksheet. But what I will do is just copy and paste the basics of this like note. It's like just an iPhone note into the description, so you can copy and paste that if you want. And again, you can work through who your avatar is. And I gotta say, avatar is kind of an annoying word because it makes you think of all these other things. It's interesting how visual of a word the word avatar is, and how it's kind of been co-opted by like the movie Avatar, or like emoji type things. Don't know what I'm talking about there, but yeah. Whereas this is like your ideal customer, right? That's what we're talking through here, is your ideal customer. And it doesn't need to be any more complicated than what I'm about to go through, but I will say you do need to think about it. You do need to understand if you have the ability at this point in your life to appeal to this avatar. And if you don't, do you have the time to wait until you can appeal to this avatar? And my very like fundamental understanding, or my very fundamental like approach toward creating an avatar, which by the way I've done since 2020. I've worked on anytime I've tried to start something new, I've worked on a worksheet like this, and I've worked through this, and I think it's wildly helpful to help determine and help you understand what kind of content should be being made for this avatar. So I think a very basic hack is like, what are you interested in? And also like, can you chop it up with somebody about the things that they are interested in because you are also interested in it? This is I think a perfect example. If I was setting my avatar as somebody who is into like golf, and that was like the main thing that they loved, I don't know anything about golf. I have never been a golfer. I know a lot of people who are. I've gone to Top Golf. I've never golfed on a course. I think a lot of people, even people who don't golf, are like, really? You've never golfed on a golf course? No, never. We didn't have the money for it growing up, even like local municipal stuff. And there's also kind of like a genetic foot thing with my family, which I don't think I'll ever talk about because it's so out there, but that means like walking a golf course is not exactly ideal. So yeah, it's anyway, I've never been a golfer. And if I was setting this as somebody who's like really into golf and maybe like grew up posh, I don't know what the hell that's like, right? I don't think I could identify with those people particularly well. And in fact, I don't think that I would love to work with that person. Maybe I would, but what I really like, especially as my position in life financially, and just like my life is getting cooler, right? I'm 39 and my life just keeps on getting cooler at this point. I'm a bit of a late bloomer in that regard, but I'm also experiencing more high-end things than I did prior to 2020, right? And I've managed to travel and things like that, and I've just like been lucky enough to have my lot in life change and be improved. And I believe that there are a lot of people who kind of crawled their way out of not like poverty. You know, that's not what I'm saying I came from, but from a place that didn't feel like it had a lot of opportunity, you know, sort of like a place in life that felt like it was a bit of a dead end or whatever, whether that be jobs you're working or sort of like youth and the place you grew up or something like that. I grew up in a perfectly fine, perfectly nice suburb. We were among the poorer families in that suburb, and I think a lot of that has affected how I go through life now, you know, because I just kind of witnessed my family and people around me, you know, deal with not having any money and really like struggling. There's actually a Grant Cardone quote, which is kind of funny, but he says like the one of the hardest things in the world is just getting by. And the first time I heard that, I felt it so much because I was just getting by. I was like, yeah, this does suck. And obviously it would be harder to not get by, right? To like literally be not getting by. But it is a very tough thing to just scrape by and just barely make your bills every single month, you know, every single day. You're just like on the edge of your seat, and it's stressful. It's stressful to the brain. So anyway, the basic idea that I'm trying to get to is like having your avatar be somebody who you don't identify with at all is I think risky. Otherwise you have to be fake forever. And some people are fake. So if you're fake, then maybe you'll be comfortable doing that. I am not comfortable being fake. I can't put up a facade for very long. And you know the saying like, I don't suffer fools? I do, actually. I suffer fools quite well. And I think the older you get, the less you suffer fools. But because you realize, like, for me, it's to the extent that I no longer suffer fools, which again, I do probably more than most people. But to the extent that I don't, it's because I look around and I go, oh, this isn't good for me and my goals and, you know, my family, right? There are things that I want to achieve, and there are things that I want to do in my life, and there's an overall like quality of life that I'm after, and I would say I've achieved it. My quality of life is really quite good, but it's a continuous pursuit that improves my quality of life. I love to pursue this, like a better life. I find it very, very fun, and I find it very satisfying, because the smallest little improvements that you can make are like, can genuinely be like huge actual day-to-day improvements. So anyway, I know that was a wandering thought, but I'm trying to appeal to the people who I want to be working with and who I want to attract, and who frankly I could chop it up with if I had to. But also, some of the goal of this channel is to be like a bit more like premium, to have this like heritage brand, that this feeling of like that it's been around for a long time and that it's bespoke and like it is of a very high quality, right? That somebody has spent a lot of time to create this very high quality brand, okay? And I gotta say, as I'm thinking about it, again, this is a little bit of a dirt road. The thought that was going on in my head, and this, I'm just hoping that this is helpful to you. The thought that was just happening in my head there was like, could I just increase the quality and start to introduce some of these ideas to the Twin Cities channel, which I might be able to, right? And because even a brand that has this like rich quality to it, some of that has to do with time, right? Quality times time equals like heritage and like trust in a brand for a long time. So while some people would say that my videos are on the To the Twin Cities channel are like quality, I look at them and I go, they could be better, you know, but I also historically on that channel, this is kind of the conversation I'm having in my brain. Historically on that channel, I've really pushed to make the huge majority of the content be easy to do and not a really heavy lift, while still being of very good quality. And Caleb Ralston, who by the way is awesome, I talked about him on the last episode. He's like a marketing genius, basically, kind of. He's a content marketing genius, if nothing else. He worked for Alex Hormozy and before that Gary Vee, and he was kind of like head of content. So Caleb Ralston, check him out, he's dope. And Caleb defines quality content by basically like, not if it's good digital film, right? Like not if it's like good visual quality, like does it connect to people? And I think more specifically, he says like, is this helpful to the person that you're trying to help? And that, I believe, is the number one thing that I've managed to do on my To the Twin Cities channel and the other channels, but is that the main goal has been to be helpful and to amass a body of work and to amass a catalog that is a reference library for people who are thinking about moving to the Twin Cities. So that's pretty good focus, in my opinion. That's a pretty narrow lane. In real estate, there's so many different lanes, right? There's downsizers, there's step-up buyers, there are first-time home buyers, there's relocations, there's probate, I don't know, there's luxury, there's like international investors or you know, local investment, there's all that stuff. But I niched down to relocation specifically. And a lot of that was because I thought I could be the most helpful using video for relocations. And so we have created this catalog of videos about the Twin Cities and all these neighborhoods and things. And the number one goal has been to try to be helpful and also like somewhat entertaining, right? I'm not just like listing stats and like, hey, here you go. It's like, I want it to be engaging to look at and helpful. And I think by being engaging and being watchable, that actually makes it more helpful, which is kind of an interesting, but by focusing on it being helpful, I kind of allowed myself the trade-off that the quality did not have to be of like the highest caliber. I allowed myself to use my GoPro and like we were using iPhone. Actually, we still do. We use iPhone for the B-roll footage. And then, of course, there's like a mini drone and stuff like that involved. But it's like, how do I use the easiest stuff that is good enough quality, right? And like, what's the best way to show this place? But I allowed myself to, in the interest of volume and to like build that catalog, which I don't regret at all, for the record. I still think is the right decision. In the interest of that, I allowed quality to suffer a little bit, because I see other people who are trying so hard to make quality so exceptional that what they do is they don't create enough volume, right? They have a handful of really nice looking videos, but the level of service that they're actually providing, the level of help that they're providing to the person watching it, like, isn't quite good enough, or just is almost non-existent, because there's not enough there. So trying to, and over the years we've kind of added in the occasional high quality video. It's a thing that actually we're gonna continue to do, and actually pepper in a few more of those and have some pretty fun ideas that I'll talk about maybe on another episode. Yeah, I'm sure I will, because I have a buddy coming to film with me for some projects, and then there's another guy who I know locally who I think will also kind of contribute. And it's a really interesting way of doing it, sort of on project basis rather than like individual video basis. But we're getting back into Avatar, and I promise, to the extent that I go on any dirt road, it's because I think there might be somebody out there who is hearing just a thought, or the way that I think, or the way that my brain is moving and kind of like bouncing around. And if I go on a dirt road, it's because I think there's a possibility that dirt road could be helpful, or could offer insight to somebody. And I think if you're watching this still, stick with me. It'll continue to happen. I promise. I will continue to provide value. So hopping over though to this Avatar worksheet, the basics, right? So you can feel free to go down, copy and paste what's down there, put it into your your notes app or something like that, or a document or whatever, and work along with it, and kind of like wrap your head around, or like work through it yours with me to understand like who you're talking to. And I'll do my very best to talk out loud about like what I'm thinking about with it. So name. This new channel is the motorcycle channel, or it's that more bespoke, luxury, kind of like heritage quality side of things. And I think I'm more likely to get a guy to be watching that. So the next question is gender, by the way. So I'm gonna say male, and I'm actually gonna work down, rather than thinking of the name, the next question is age. And I'm trying to think of like, who is it that can afford a luxury home, that like really cares about these quality things. And some of that has to do with like, they have enough income to do that, to care about those things. And we'll get to all that, but what age would somebody have to be to like really go, like start to appreciate that quality? And as it pertains to homes and things like that. So I'm gonna say that they're 40. I'm 39, so that's pretty good. Maybe I'll change that. Marital status, I'm gonna say they're married. I'm gonna say that this person is slightly less of a late bloomer than me, and that they are a bit more established than where I am at this age. And some of that is just because, again, I was a late bloomer. I didn't figure a lot of things out that pertain to like the path I'm on until pretty late in life. Oskar is now under the table, and his little head is resting on my foot. It's adorable. Actually, he's got a big head now, to be honest. So this person is married, and then number/age of kids. Do they have kids? I think they do. I think they have 2 kids and maybe one kid, and that kid is 6, something like that. 1 kid, I'll say it's a boy, 6 years old. Okay. Maybe I might change the boy, I'm not sure. But then the question of where does this person live? This is complicated for me, because do I continue to focus on relocation? Is this a different branch of the relocation? Excuse me. By the way, iced latte from Spy House. If you're ever in Minnesota, Spy House has great coffee. You can order online. It takes like 7 minutes. This is not an ad. They're like my main go-to, especially since they have the online ordering. And if I'm just trying to grab coffee, I'm not trying to wait in a line for 20 minutes. Location. That's tricky. Do I make them a relocation client, or and again, is this another arm, or are they local and I can appease to that? Man, I might have to come back to that. Purchase role, I'm going to say that they are a buyer. I tend to think that video content is more helpful to buyers, but we also have this other bit of content that we do on our channel that is like home tour videos that are also very not helpful to sellers, but they are attractive to sellers. So this content, again, which is likely going to be on a different channel, is for a buyer, 40-year-old man with 1 kid. This guy's name is James, and boy, I'm gonna say that this person, because it will allow for a completely different avatar, which again, I'm not sure is the right call yet. The question of what would I want to, this is what I'm working through. The question of, should it be a completely different avatar? Should there be no overlap? The question then becomes, do I have the infrastructure within the team to help this person should they choose to work with me? And I would say yes. If they are local, I would say the answer to that is yes. And you know, I'm gonna make the kid 4 years old. And part of the reason for that is because I'm thinking that they are probably step up buyers ultimately, if they are buyers, and they have a home and they've started making more money and they want to upgrade to something a bit more luxury. And by started making more money, obviously I mean like quite a bit more money, but it's taken them a little while. And James, 40-year-old named James, he's married, he's got 1 son who is 4 years old. And part of the reason for the desire to move beyond where they are is the schools, I would say. So that's kind of like a thing that I'm thinking about, is at what age do people go, okay, we have to go somewhere different, or we'd like to move somewhere different because, you know, our kids are going to school. But I also want to keep in mind that, did they buy when, you know, how much has their financial situation improved? You know, would they have bought somewhere affordable, like first-time homebuyer type thing, one of those more, you know, at or below the median price point, or would they have bought in a higher end place, but they want to maybe go from like a new build to, you know, like a spec home, and they want to go from there to, you know, kind of a dream home, like something with more land or something like that. Or just maybe architecturally a bit more compelling. And yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that. This is why I think is so important to work through. Like, who am I talking to? What do they care about? And so I'm gonna say that this person lives in Minnesota. And or am I? I'm gonna say that they live in Denver for now. And should I choose a neighborhood in Denver? I think I should. I think they live in Denver proper. I think they live in a neighborhood like, I don't think it would be like a condo-y neighborhood. I don't think it would be like in downtown necessarily. It'll be more of like a, you know, neighborhood-y neighborhood, like Washington Park. But that is kind of like, that neighborhood is like so lovely that I think a lot of people wouldn't move from there if they, you know, had a house there that they owned. I'm gonna say Washington Park for now, and I'm gonna put a big old question mark on there. But my intention is that they are living somewhere that they are in a nice neighborhood, right? They can afford a nice home there, and they wouldn't settle for a neighborhood they didn't want to live in. They probably would have kept renting if they couldn't end up buying, or if they couldn't have bought a house in a neighborhood they wanted to be in, which is in, you know, the upper echelon of, you know, niceties for a neighborhood. If they couldn't have bought, they would have continued to rent, and they would have continued to rent somewhere like Rhino or something like that, or Lodo, something along those lines, where they were, you know, somewhat like urban living prior, living in nice, you know, nice apartments, and they probably got married, you know, maybe not 10 years ago, but maybe 6 years ago or 7 years ago, and when they did, they were living in an apartment, and they said, let's buy a house because we can, and we can get one in a neighborhood we really love. And they did that, but they are moving to Minnesota for one reason or another, which we will get to. And so, because they are moving from a really nice neighborhood in Denver to Minnesota, the thing that allows them is to upgrade from what is undeniably a very nice neighborhood. Let's say, $1 million like gets you in there maybe, but probably their house was like 1.5 to 2 million. That would be my guess. But here they could spend the same amount of money and get just so much more house and maybe even more land and just like a little bit more of like this spread out feel, which I think is something that this person obviously cares about. And they can get really good schools, whether that's public or private. I don't associate these people with private schools yet, but it could be. It could be that they just really, really want the best for their kid and they think that that's what that is. But yeah, so the next kind of step is field of work. So what does James do? And what is his job title? How much money does he make? Okay, so I feel like this person is not a business owner. I feel like this person likes to work 40 or 50 hours a week. Maybe they work for a mid-sized company and they're somewhat social. They kind of value their weekends and going out and doing things and hanging out with friends at night, which are interestingly things that like are not necessarily main priority. After all, it is Sunday morning at 11:20 and I'm here making this. But I'm also in a building phase of my life, so that's interesting. Maybe they have a job and he's also starting a company. But that will have to be, I'm going to put that under miscellaneous right now. Okay, and I'm not sure what that company would be, but it's something that he's maybe a little bit more passionate about, and he's making enough money at his job that he feels he can start this other company, and maybe he has partners or something like that, or maybe it's some company with his wife, and maybe the wife is kind of the one running the show there. Interesting to think about, and I'm very curious what this is like for you who's watching this to hear me think through these things. This is not just, oh, he's a doctor and blah 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 and he does this, and it's like not that easy, right? You need to go like, what kind of person is this actually? Like I want to be able to picture this person. And maybe with his wife, maybe the wife has a photography business or some sort of like they want to build a wedding venue. I think that's pretty interesting. Or maybe they want to start a winery, or yeah, maybe a restaurant, but I don't really know that I really think of this guy as being the kind of person who would start a restaurant. Maybe a coffee shop. Okay, maybe a clothing store, like vintage or not sure about that. But like, I think I like the idea that like they're both making pretty good money. He makes better money than the wife. The wife doesn't love her job, but she's very creative, and they are both very creative and sort of aesthetically minded, which, by the way, I'm just putting that under the values. So values, what they value in life, creativity, they're aesthetically minded, they like beautiful things and places. Okay. Again, that's a little bit under values, a little bit under kind of the miscellaneous thing. So then what does he do at the moment? I'm going to say he's doing medical sales, but I'm not totally sure about that. I'm tempted to just say like doctor. I'm tempted to say like dentist, but when I think about every dentist I've ever met, I don't know that they're that artistic and that like creative. And I think medical sales seems like a job that somebody might just get, kind of like and take because you can make really good money in it. But doesn't necessarily like, this person doesn't necessarily fit like the exact like traditional mold of what somebody who is in that does. Again, similar to me. That's me just projecting my own self onto this person, which actually is, I think, what you should be doing too. They have a career, the career does quite well for themselves. It could be just sales maybe, but yeah, let's say medical sales for right now. And so the job title, I'm just going to say salesman. I'm thinking about one of my friends who represents brands, like clothing brands, but there's just not that many of them, I think. It's kind of crazy. He represents like a bunch of brands. He's a friend of mine that I've known since like kindergarten. Represents a bunch of brands that are, well, actually not anymore. He just switched over, but he represents a brand that for sure everybody's heard of. That's kind of like an athletic, kind of like outdoorsy brand. But he used to represent a ton of brands and would kind of help them get placed into stores. But I think there's just way fewer of him, to be honest. So I think medical sales, we'll stick with that. And job title is just sales, something like that. I don't even know what they would call that job, to be honest. Probably salesman, but I don't know. Income. This is actually something that I almost need to reverse engineer. So I'm going to say, what would a mortgage be on a $2 million house? So let's see, calculating. Okay, so I'm calculating that like approximately to your monthly payments, let's say it's like $12,000 a month, and so much of that will depend on what house they sold, but in the $10,000-ish per month mortgage, then how much would they have to have, what would they have to make? If it's $12,000 a month, that's $144 a year. Making 3 times what your mortgage is probably what a lot of people are looking at, and that would probably still put them, I would say really quite comfortable, because if you think about how much money is left over after your mortgage, sure, it's 2/3 of your income, but your income is high. So I always find those numbers a little bit strange when people say, oh, this percentage. It's like, well, if you make $20 million a year, like you're 25% of that is your house. That means you have like, what is that, $15 million a year left over. Like, probably that could go up higher. And if you had $12 million a year to live off of, you'd still be like very comfortable, right? So those percentages I think are a little bit weird, but if it's 144 and then you have 250K a year to live off of, that seems pretty decent after that. And that would be, what's the math on that? That'd be like 350K total. But I think with the wife's job, I think probably collectively, I'm gonna say he makes 350K a year. She makes, I'll say 150K. Okay. And also keep in mind that they own the house. So a house in Wash Park, have a good chunk of equity. I'm gonna say that their equity is somewhere around the like 500K mark. Okay. And then they have money saved as well. So on a $2 million house, they might be able to put $1 million down, which again would probably put payment around around 10,000 ish. Super ballpark. So education level, I'm gonna say bachelor's degree. I don't know if I know or care where they went to college. I have favorite quote and inspiration in there. I think inspiration I always like to think of as like what inspires them to continue pushing in life, and what, if this person is working to improve their life, which I would say this person very much is, what is that inspiration? And I would say like freedom of movement, opportunities for child, or I'll say for son, and to show his son that he wasn't afraid to try things. Okay, so I think the moving to Minnesota to start a business with his wife, I find that pretty interesting, and I think there's a bit of like being able to allow his son to look back and go, so when I was 4, you moved to Minnesota. Why'd you do that? And they say, well, to start the company. And hopefully, when the kid's 10 or 15, he can see the fruit of that labor, and because he wanted to be home more, and he wanted the kid to have, that like unique experience of like growing up around somebody who is starting something. So favorite quote, I'm gonna say, is there anywhere else you'd rather be? This is kind of funny. Which is something JJ McCarthy just said, who's like the new Vikings quarterback. He just said that in the huddle or something like that, as the Vikings were down by like 20 or something and made a comeback. Actually, honestly, I'm like, for that being like a 22-year-old young man, like that's a great moment. That's that's such a good thing to say to a group of dudes like that. So, okay, is there anywhere else you'd rather be? And then the inspiration, again, is freedom of movement, opportunities for his son, and to show his son that he wasn't afraid to try things. Miscellaneous things that I kind of wrote down is, he's starting his own company with his wife. I said maybe. I'm going to say with his wife. I don't know exactly what that's going to be yet, but a photo business, a wedding venue, a clothing store, vintage, or maybe not. Maybe a winery, maybe a coffee shop, something like that. And they currently own a house in Washington Park, Denver, or Wash Park, and have a good chunk of equity, about 500K in equity, I'm going to say, and another 500K for down payment. Okay, maybe even more than that. But that's what they're like, cool, we can part ways with this money for down payment on this house or this property and still have money to put into the business that they want to grow. So now here's just this next section I kind of say is now more about how they think. So values, what they value in life. So creativity, aesthetically minded people, beautiful things and places. I'll say like nice, excellent restaurants, crafts, like high quality of craftsmanship. I'm trying to kind of equate it with like this kind of person who like dinners at their house with friends and family, and like having a beautiful place to do that. Okay, imagine huge dining room like with like beautiful kind of view out the back, or really incredible backyard spaces, things like that, like on just like a really just an undeniable level, right? Like magazine quality home, you know, like this may be like cheesy, but like Instagrammable, you know, coffee shops and business interiors. So sort of being around other businesses that are like, again, in that sort of bespoke kind of thing that are, you know, where they're doing things at a very high level, and there's just an undeniable beauty to those places, even if it's just to go to grab a coffee. That said, I'm going to say this guy likes motorcycles, he likes cars, he likes watches. I'm going to say he's a guy's guy. I don't know if I like that, actually. Maybe he is a little bit. I'm going to say he thinks, he knows, this is probably he knows it's cool to be a good husband and father. He's not too obsessed with being flashy and being attracting people in that regard. He likes those things because he likes those things, right? Like watches and cars, and he likes to experience those things. You know, beautiful homes, obviously, but he knows or reminds himself maybe that it's cool and it's a good thing for him, and it's a good thing across the board to be a good father, to be a good husband, and he's very comfortable in that. He loves his wife and loves building a life with her. Okay, cool. I think that's pretty good for values. So goals, what does he want to achieve in life? You know, maybe we said a little bit of that already, but like I would say building his own thing is important to him. Not like, no shade intended, as they say, not just working a good job and working for somebody, but he wants to be able to look back and go, I did that, right? Maybe I worked for somebody and worked my way and did that kind of work to get to somewhere else. But I'm going to say I did that, or maybe more importantly, we did that, right? So with his wife and his son, he wants to be able to look back and say, we did that, right? We did that. That was hard, and it was cool. Some goals would be like to buy the dream car, to have deep friendships, to have a rich family life, maybe more kids, maybe. He wants to share sort of like a piece of himself and his taste and the taste of his wife. Whoa, I'm not going to say that like that. And his wife's skills and talents with the world. Okay, kind of wants to be able to lift up his wife, to help her achieve what he knows she can do. Okay, yeah, and then I think, even though I'm not sure that it's like technically even really a good thing all the time, I wonder, but to be able to give his kid more opportunity, maybe even to give his kid a head start. Okay, then we move into the wants and needs sections, which wants are like, what do they want from a real estate company? What do they want as it pertains to me? And I'm gonna say that taste is huge. And what's interesting is not because they don't have it or because they need my taste to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, but because they want to see eye to eye on taste, right? Maybe they do want 5% of input on the total thing, but they want somebody to help them navigate it who can actually like speak their language. They want, I will say, I think they want a team, specifically they want a YouTube channel or content that sort of like connects them with more of the stuff that they like, okay? So some of that I see as like, they want to be able to watch the content that I'm making and sort of allow it to like enrich their life, because they go, oh, that's cool. I've never seen that place, or I've never heard of that business, or just like, yeah, there's probably a little bit of the content would be like, I can't wait to live there, or I'm like, man, I think that's a really good place, that kind of thing. So content that connects them with more of the stuff they like, but maybe didn't know about yet. Okay, I think they want an agent they could have over for dinner with other friends, and I'm going to say the friends are somewhat fancy, hoity-toity, if you will, but also I'm going to say maybe they're somewhat elevated in their tastes. They're not like, they're somewhat elevated in their taste, but they're down to earth. Okay, so not looking for somebody who like can just kind of hack it in like a, oh, I'm so fancy kind of way, but can hang. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna say content that is helpful to their relocation as well. Okay, Oscar's getting a little, there you go, good boy buddy. Content that's helpful to the relocation as well. So I wonder if that would be like home tours, builder profiles, maybe remodeler profiles, things like that could be interesting. And it's an interesting part of like when I first started thinking about this channel, I wasn't really thinking about that, but at the end of the day, like I do love beautiful homes. And if I can make a channel that's kind of like the beautiful things, the bespoke things, the high level of craftsmanship, where it can tie in, and I can also do home tours, I think that's pretty cool. I think that is like one channel that can all live together. I think I would watch that channel. And I think there's a little bit of like, when you have good taste, when you have like, I don't want to say good taste, but when you have like a defined taste and like a certain aesthetic that you really, really are drawn to, and you understand the stuff that you like, sometimes the difficulty is finding more of it, right? Where you go, these things are so great, but like, I just need more. I need more of this content to like, I need access to more of it. And yeah, I think that's pretty cool. It's making me think about some stores, some clothing stores around the metro that kind of have this like really high quality thing to them, without being like too stuffy, which is again kind of a thing. I would say they want somebody different, somebody less typical. And of course I say that. Of course that is helpful to me and my cause, because I am kind of atypical for a realtor. But this is like the kind of thing where like it makes sense. You're making your avatar. You don't want them to be somebody who wants somebody different than you. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing? You're gonna have to pretend to be that person, right? Or you'll just never work with these people. So you're trying to find, in my situation, you're trying to find like the person who would find you compelling, right? And like what can you put out there also to help like bolster them thinking that you are compelling. And yeah, and so I think somebody less typical, somebody who displays competency. Okay, cool. All right, I mean, yeah, so then needs, what are they needs? That's funny. What do they need? I'll say it's actually competency. They need honesty. They need all the fiduciary duties, of course. So I'm gonna say, right, they need you to be legal and to do all the things that any realtor legally is required of you, or is required to do. But what do they need beyond that? I would say a deep understanding of craftsmanship, a deep understanding of like land purchase potentially, and I think that's a thing where I think it's pretty interesting for me to be looking at this and go, that's something I gotta learn more about that, because we don't do much of that, and so they want me to be able to identify really exceptional craftsmanship in a house, and they also want me to understand like how the process would work to potentially buy a piece of land and build a dream home on it, but also a deep understanding of maybe remodel, logistics, and companies. Okay, so I think the really interesting thing about so far everything I've done, this is the thing where I go, that's just an area that I have to improve. And also, it would be helpful to make content around those things to help me simultaneously improve and to show that I know what I'm talking about with these things. The ability to help remotely, sure, easy peasy. I would say they need to feel like they can trust me and that I have their best interest in mind. I think no matter what your avatar looks like, you can put that down. And I think that should be paramount. That should be a thing you're thinking about all the time. Can this client sort of rest assured knowing that the person who's helping them with a huge transaction genuinely has their best interest in mind and isn't chasing a check? That is, I think, has been among the most useful, important traits in the content that we put out there, as well as when we're meeting with somebody. That has to be the experience. And hard to teach that, I would say. Hard to teach, hey, I don't need this check. I'm doing this to help you, and I'm going to get paid because I'm good at it, but none of this has to do with the fact that I need this check. Sometimes just arriving at a place where you don't need the check is the best move. But yeah, so I think that's an important one, and I literally think feel like they can trust me and that I have their best interest in mind should be on yours. Okay, I'm gonna say they need good systems in place to not feel like they're in the dark. Okay, maybe that's an AKA great communication. I'm gonna go back up to want. I'm gonna say somebody who's buying a home like this does not want to feel like they are in a CRM, okay? They don't want to feel that you're sending them automated messages. I don't want to feel that way. I know that I kind of loathe anytime I can tell it's just some automated message, right? That's why so many of these like agent recruiting CRMs are just like, oh my God, shut up. You're so cringy. It's so obvious that this is a CRM, and then you're trying to use language that sounds like you're not, right? I just had a dude Paul from the team got a text from some bigger team around here, and it was obviously automated. He's like, dude, these are so annoying. And it says like, hey Paul, I know you're probably happy where you're at currently, but if you're ever thinking about a change, we'd like to be the first ones you talk to. And he doesn't respond, and then they send, like the next day, they send an emoji, which I don't remember what the emoji was, or no, a GIF, and then it says like, this is really important to me. And it's like, no, it's not, No, I'm not. I'm definitely not. That's obviously sent, like, I don't even know you. How am I important to you in that way? So, yeah, I just think like those things come across as so phony. And so they don't want to feel like they're in a CRM. They don't want somebody who feels phony. Phony baloney, no good. No bueno. Okay, systems in place to not feel like they're in the dark. Great communication. All right, well, let's move on to anxieties and frustrations. So what frustrates them? What could frustrate them before, during, or after the process? So I think if one would be bad communication. One would be commission breath, I'll say, because I understand what that means. Basically, just if they get a whiff that like you're only in it to get the check, they might not love that, right? Certainly they won't find that super compelling. So, but other frustrations are, if they're building or renovating, like slow timelines, sloppy construction, I'll just say sloppy work in general. Maybe frustration would be like wasting time. Yeah, for sure, wasting time. Who doesn't that frustrate? But then also like missing out. Maybe that's more of an anxiety. Okay, wasting time. I would say not feeling like they are being shown the whole picture. So that could be like kind of like hidden costs as it pertains to like the purchase of the home. Obviously, if I had like hidden fees, that could be annoying too. I just have this in quotes. I wish I would have known that. I think that's something that I've learned throughout the last 5 or so years of doing this, is to try to put all the cards on the table, right? To show them the whole picture, even when things are redundant or are not likely to come into the equation at that point. Because every now and then there's somebody who wants to play a card but doesn't know that a card can be played because you didn't tell them it to them because you made an assumption that they wouldn't want to use it. And that might be 1 out of 100 people who goes, well, shit, I wish I would have known that. And you're like, oh, okay, my bad. So I avoid that as much as possible by putting all the cards on the table, even if I think they're not likely to be used. And I think that is very frustrating for people. So yeah, I think that's an important one. So for anxieties, I have missing out on the perfect home. I have buying with a bad builder who doesn't kind of like follow through in the long run. That would be very high anxiety, I think. I think that's pretty obvious. And then what makes them anxious before the process? I would say analysis, paralysis. I would say not really knowing the market. So maybe that would be like ignorance causes anxiety. So ignorance and not really knowing the market, builders, locations, etc. Okay, which again I think is actually this is why I think these are so helpful, is when things like that you go, okay, the best way to be helpful to somebody like this is to answer those questions, right? Obviously, bad communication, that's like once they start working with you. So can I kind of fill that ignorance gap? Or ignorance debt, I suppose, through video as it pertains to this? And I think I can. I've done that for other people in a sort of a different way, a bunch, and successfully, and it's great. But this is, just a little bit different. Sort of being able to create a catalog that helps people understand those things. It's very interesting to think about these things, especially while I'm filming it. Okay. I think another anxiety would be to end up somewhere they don't love, from a location standpoint, etc. Okay. Another anxiety is just like relocation, putting in roots. Okay. And then we'll move on to deal breakers. What would make them never hire me in the first place? I think being too political, classless, being too stuffy, which obviously I won't be. I think I have to make sure that I'm thinking about the things that what might I actually do? Because being too stuffy is much less likely. So what might I actually do that would be a deal breaker? Not know what I'm talking about. That could happen. Not know what I'm talking about. Not, I'll say, appear out of my depth, uncomfortable at higher price points. That's something I did a ton back in the day when I first got started in real estate. Again, only 5 years ago. I would make videos about more expensive areas, right? Places like Edina, where median sale price is like around $1 million. And like, I didn't understand that I was doing it, and it could actually be good in the long run for that, like that main avatar for that channel is more middle of the road. It's 400 to 600K buyer, right? Really probably 300K to 800K, with the sweet spot being, closer to that middle point. But I would make videos about Edina, and like they'd be, these neighborhoods that now I'm like pretty comfortable in, and they would have like, 1.5, $2 million homes. And like, I'd be like, boy, big stuff, like now I'm like, well, what message was I sending? I was sending a message that like, I was not comfortable in that price point, and so it's been, but I also think like, the thing that what allows me to like forgive myself for like doing silly stuff like that is that, yes, I was signaling that I wasn't ready to people like that, but I also was signaling to people who, a bunch of the people we helped were like, can't afford that, not yet, and maybe not ever. And I just wanted to help more people. So by being honest about sort of like, that isn't for me at that point, especially, I'm like, I actually can appreciate my previous self for just being genuine about that stuff. But now the more I do this, the more comfortable I get into that world, the more I've dipped my toes in, I'll say, the more I go, okay, I'm actually comfortable in this, and I think it's cool, and there's all this stuff that I really love that's like, that like bespoke, beautiful stuff, right? Like I love that stuff. And if I want to work with it, I have to be comfortable with the price points. And I am mentally more and more comfortable at these price points, even for myself. And I think there's something to that as well. Even if a person was like comfortable talking about a $2 million, purchase, or $4 million purchase, if they would never get to that point, I think it would be really hard to trust them. If like those dollar amounts feel very abstract to a person, I think it'd be really hard to trust that person with that transaction, and not because they're not trustworthy, but just because they don't seem like they know. Okay? And that would be like the appear out of my depth, uncomfortable at higher price points. I would say a deal breaker that I don't know that I can necessarily combat is like they don't agree with my taste, right? A person like this who likes what I think are like really gaudy fixtures and things like that. It's like, all right, I don't like that stuff. So I'm probably going to say things and voice my opinion about certain things that just won't necessarily like align with somebody else, and that's okay. So, and then an obstacle, what are other things that are in the way of them working with me? I think the biggest one that I again, you can put this on yours for sure, is they don't know I exist. Okay? That is the number one obstacle of every single client, every single potential client in this world, which in the Twin Cities is 60 to 80,000. Really, it's more than that as far as clients go. It's probably closer to 100,000, especially when you consider sort of people are double-siding things, but it's probably right around that. There's 100,000 clients out there every year in the Twin Cities, and most of them don't know who you are. Okay? That's eye-opening. So then and if they know who you are, they don't know that you do real estate. Then another obstacle would be like their best friend does real estate and is more like them, right? There's a quote from a branding guy, I wish I could remember who it was, who says, don't tell people why they should like you, show them how they are like you. And so if somebody's like your best friend and you know that you have a ton in common, it's going to be hard to be more like them than their best friend. So yeah, if your best friend does this, if their best friend does that, well, then you're probably not going to get them, right? Like, which is some of why I like the relocation thing, is because if somebody was this person and they were buying where they were local to, they might have made some connections with another realtor. And so the content side of things, obviously the real world side of things tells me I should try to make connections with people who are like this here. The content side of things says it's nice to be that first point of contact for somebody here who is looking for this kind of thing. Yeah, so that's an obstacle. Another obstacle would be like maybe a builder getting in the way, or a misconception that builders don't work with agents, that you have to come to them unrepresented. Let's see. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Also, this is getting long and I have to wrap this up. So, information sources. YouTube, maybe like ChatGPT, maybe just AI in general. I'll say AI search and things like that. I think they're probably pretty savvy with that kind of thing. But also then social media platforms, I'm going to say Instagram. Instagram is king for this person. Content creators. There's this dude I'm watching called Freddie Dobbs. He's like this English motorcycle dude. He's so chill, but I just don't think he's like the right fit. And I don't think it's like any of these like super billionaire dudes necessarily. I think this guy makes enough money right now that he is not necessarily like looking at that stuff too much. I'll say like, I know I just said not super billionaires dude, but like Alex Hormozy, I think he's the right age. I think Gary Vee also. I'm gonna say Caleb Ralston. Again, they're thinking about starting that business. Because then I would also say like there are like clothing brands and things. I'm just gonna say brands, which I'm actually adding to this, by the way. This wasn't on there before, but I'm gonna say Amundsen. I'm going to say Filson. I have Filson on right now. I'm gonna say like I'm gonna say like Selvage Denim. I know that's not a brand. Brands like that, like those forever brands. Oddly enough, I can't even think of some of them because I don't buy enough of them. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna say those like there's a shop called Black Blue in St. Paul. There's things like that. That's like just a shop where you could get that. So podcasts, I'm gonna say this guy listens to like My First Million, but also like Joe Rogan, maybe Theo Vaughn. Doesn't strike me as being like too horribly, or like too horribly is maybe a weird way of putting it, but like super up, like a extremely political person. So maybe more like the motivation side of that and kind of the entertainment side of things. Books, I'm just gonna say audiobooks because he's busy and he drives. So he's more into audiobooks, and I'll say broadly like the self-help category. No, I'll say the business category. Blogs and websites, maybe I'll just say Pinterest for aesthetics. Conferences, just business stuff. Maybe like cars and coffee. Role models, Toto Wolff. Okay, Toto Wolff is the team principal of the Mercedes F1 team. Who's actually sick, by the way, if you like watching any interviews with him. Some really interesting stuff. That was a pretty deep dive and longer version of this than I thought I would do, but I just hope it was helpful. If by chance you're still watching this, just say Toto Wolff. Okay? If I see a comment that says Toto Wolff, I will be thrilled. Even if it's literally one person. Cool. All right. See you in the next one. Bye.